You are tuning into The Deal. I'm Danny Brown, and every week I interview the best real estate agents in the world and talk about seven-figure commissions, celebrity and high-profile clients, and the craziest real estate stories you could ever imagine. Enjoy this week's episode. See you, Sam Kraemer. Welcome to The Deal.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's good to be here.
I was just looking and, over my 22-year career, you were either general counsel or head of legal for about 19 of those 22 years. So I don't want to age myself, but there you go.
Yeah, well, that ages me a little more, honestly. But it's good to know that we haven't had to do too much together because you're so good at what you do.
I was just remembering also there's been one incident where we've ended up in court in 22 years. It was it was recent with a friend. It was unusual, and we won't even get into it, but a very disturbing, weird experience. But at 22 years, pretty good.
I'll tell you what, Southern California for 22 years, one time is not bad.
Not bad. So, okay, for those that don't know, Sam Kraemer, you're the head of legal at Compass in California. You've been a general counsel at Berkshire Hathaway, Prudential California Realty, and when I started, I guess it was John Aaroe Associates, and then it was Prudential California. You've been at the game a long time, and before we just get into all the crazy shit that happens in our business and the things that dumb real estate agents like me do, why don't you just give a brief sort of backstory of your law career and where you went to school and how you even got into real estate?
Yeah, sure. I went to undergrad. I graduated from UCLA. I went to law school at USC, and did the big firm thing for a few years. Did all kinds of different litigation. I was a litigator back in those days, and did some real estate work. Represented contractors or developers, that kind of thing. Worked at another firm or two, smaller kind of thing, and just decided that for my life and what I wanted to try and go in-house. I'd heard from a lot of people who were not thrilled at being lawyers that in-house was a good way to spend the career. And so I just started looking, and there was a broker in town back then named Fred Sands Realtors.
Yep.
Fred,
legendary.
Fred had an in-house legal department of about 5 lawyers, and I joined and was a litigator there. So I spent my first 10, 11 years in this business representing real estate agents and brokers who got sued for making mistakes in transactions.
Got it.
And so it's a real good way to learn the business, right? Because you learn what everybody points at and says you did wrong, and you learn how to fix it, right? And so, I did that for 11 years or so until Fred sold to Coldwell Banker. And then I transitioned away. I went to Prudential from there. And we didn't litigate in-house there. We did more of a risk management kind of thing where we get involved ahead of time, try and stop lawsuits before they happen because nobody wins when people get sued. And I've been doing that ever since, in addition to obviously lots of other things. As general counsel, you do a lot of other legal things. But, I've been a real estate broker's lawyer for most of my career, and that's what my expertise is in.
There you go. So there's a good backstory. So you cut your teeth on litigation and big law firms, and for as long as we've worked together, your advice has always been what you just said. Let me show you how to stay out of trouble. Let me explain what you need to do to avoid the pitfalls so that you never need to call me and go, holy crap, Sam, what do I do? We're in trouble. That said, California is a litigious state, correct?
Yes, California is a litigious state. I've worked for now two companies that were at least nationally connected. Compass is a national brokerage. And when I worked for Berkshire Hathaway, they own companies across the country. And, California just dominates the world of real estate litigation, frankly. We had more in California when I was at Berkshire Hathaway than probably all the rest of the companies combined.
Wow.
It's just the culture of the place.
Nature of the beast. So California, Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, Hollywood, with the personalities and the egos. And I imagine there's a lot of legal crap that goes down. So without getting into the whole, list, what are sort of, from the real estate agent standpoint, where most of our audience is, what are some of the things that you would say, man, if real estate agents just didn't do this, I'd avoid so many losses? What are one or two or three or many of those things that stand out that are like the no-brainers?
Okay, well, the first and most obvious and biggest no-brainer is disclosures, right?
Hey, my favorite word.
Your favorite subject. Yeah, exactly. California is one of those states where not only the seller but the real estate agents have an obligation to disclose what the law defines or calls material facts regarding the property to the buyer. And I would say, and I'm going to be conservative here, I'm going to say 75 to 85% of the lawsuits, and it's probably higher than that, are non-disclosure lawsuits. You did not tell me about X.
That's
And
what
and
most of it
so,
is.
if agents would understand that there is not a lawsuit in the world that is worth the commission they're going to earn on the transaction, and just disclosed everything they know about a property every time, they would never get sued, most likely. And frankly, they'd probably do more business because they're not spending hours with lawyers. They're getting referrals. They're getting repeat business. I always say this, and I'm not sure agents believe me or agree with me, but our interests actually align. Agents think lawyers get in the way, right? And then
Yeah,
lawyers do get in the way a lot. I get it. But I'm assuming if I asked you, Danny, about where your business comes from, you tell me a lot of it's repeat and a lot of it's referrals. Every
100%.
agent I've ever talked to tells me that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, you don't want an unhappy client at the end of a
No.
deal, because if they think you didn't tell them everything you should have, or you did something wrong, they're not going to refer to you. They're not coming back to you. And so these things I talk about, I think, are good for your business, right? And so disclosure is absolutely number one. Number two, I think, well, I'm not sure the number two in number, but another thing would be for real estate agents to remember who they are and what their duties in the job are. In other words, real estate agents are great in relationships, and they want to be everything that they can, to their client, that they can
Yeah.
be. But sometimes you can't be everything. You're not a lawyer. You shouldn't give legal advice. You're not a contractor. You shouldn't give construction advice.
Yeah.
You shouldn't tell somebody, oh, it's only going to cost a few bucks to fix this problem. It's going to be easy to fix. You're not trained for that. And when we do those kind of things, we get into trouble because invariably we're wrong. Murphy's Law. And so
Yeah.
we should always remember where we are, what our expertise is, stick to that expertise, and remember to refer, to another expert for another subject, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, those 2 points seem to cover a good majority of red flag issues that you see coming.
No question about it.
I remember sitting in big rooms with you and David Ravitz and David Offer and Larry Young and Gary Glass discussing this in my first year, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the business over and over. And you always said, look, it takes a career to build a good reputation and 30 seconds to ruin it. That's something you and Nancy Beckerman always preached.
Yep.
And then the other big thing you always preach was, look, guys and gals, disclosure is everything. Over disclose, and talk your clients into over disclosing, because you always said, look, if it's a huge disclosure issue that everyone cares about, great. Let them know up front, articulate it up front, because you're going to filter through. Most people are going to opt out of that property, and you got to get to a buyer that can live with it. Or it's the other side of the coin where most people don't care about this issue. So you might as well disclose up front and let the few buyers that do care opt out, and they're out of the way. Rather than don't say a word, get into escrow, see if they figure it out. Hopefully they figure it out, because if they don't figure it out and it closes, and then we got the lawsuit when they do figure it. So these are like just gems that were drilled into me over and over. And I really think, I've lived by that for 22, 23 years, and it's kept me out of trouble. And it's not easy, because we do get into situations with clients like, wait, but I don't have, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, I don't want you to tell them that. And no, legally I have to tell them that. I can't risk my license over this.
Right. And by the way, so do you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, right? And the lawsuit's no better for you than it is for me, right? So I'm buying you insurance when I do this. And you're going to be able to pocket your money and move on with your life and not have to deal with this ever again. It's just not worth it.
So I'm going to drill a little deeper now. And I have an idea how you're going to answer this, but I could be wrong. Out of the non-disclosure issues, what are one of the most common specific non-disclosure items that come up after the fact that weren't disclosed?
There are a number of categories,
Okay.
there's lots of non-disclosure cases about like relating to the size of a property or
Okay.
misrepresentation relating to the size of a property, right? You say it's X square feet and it's not,
That's tricky. Yes. You see
or
that all
some
the time.
portion of the, because these numbers are always different, right? Somebody will measure it at X, somebody will
Yeah.
measure it at 2 times X.
Yes.
The
Inside
city,
wall, outside wall, no staircase.
correct.
Add-on was missed. Garage
Patios,
covered.
garages that you
Yeah.
finish, all that stuff.
Patio. Yeah.
And the city or the county has their own number, which is, allegedly the unbiased number, but their records are no good because who knows how old this house is, how long ago the measurement was done, what was added, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it all relates to what's legal or what's not, right? If I'm told that a house is 3,000 square feet and the city shows it's 1,500, that's a red flag that maybe there are permit issues in that house, right? Maybe I added things without permits, and that's another problem, right? I mean, that's a giant issue about disclosure because, it can mean something's not safe. The city could, I've seen those instances where somebody built something without a permit, the city finds out about it and they order it torn down, right? And so number one, you lose the square footage, but number two, the expense is gigantic, right? So that's a really, really big one.
Have you seen that actually where they say tear down the structure?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely. Talk about stupid little things about that, Danny. I once got a call from a guy out of the blue. Hi, my name is John Doe. I don't remember what his name was. I work at the LA City Department of Building and Safety. Why would you be calling me? I was walking through my neighborhood this weekend and there was an open house sign on a house down the street. And on the open house sign, it said guest house, meaning advertising that the property had a guest house.
Right, legal guest house.
So the guy says to me, I just went back to the office and I plugged in the address, and lo and behold, there's no permit for a guest house. And so I'm now going to go out and inspect and figure out, why are you advertising a guest house where this address doesn't have one? Just that simple, stupid thing got not us. We hadn't disclosed anything, but the seller now had a problem because they're advertising a guest house that they didn't properly build and can't legally advertise. And, so it can happen in so many ways. The nosy neighbor. Danny, the number of times that a problem arises because the neighbor comes by after escrow closes and says, did they tell you about this? And they didn't, and we didn't know about it, but the seller did. The seller didn't share it, right?
Yeah,
so
I've had that happen a few times before it went into escrow, that a neighbor came by and said, did you know A, B, and C? I'm like, no, I'm glad you told us. At least we had time to now look into it.
Happens all the time. And so those kind of things, obviously defects too. Did your roof leak, right? Did you have
that's a big one,
problem, right? Those kind of things are always, and people think, and I understand it too, right? They think, I had a roof leak 10 years ago and I fixed it.
Yes.
And I've had no problem since then. So why would you disclose it, right?
That I deal with that the most in my dialogue with sellers.
Right.
That is the most common thing. Why would I disclose it? They repaired it X amount of years ago, no issues. And I'm like, well, you still need to disclose it. And if you don't, you're taking a risk.
Because the day after escrow closes, Murphy's Law is going to come into play again. It's going to rain and it's going to leak in that exact same spot. And so instead, and by the way, you don't have to just disclose it leaked 10 years ago. You disclose leaked 10 years ago. I repaired it. I've had no leaks since then. Now you've actually turned it into a positive, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I fixed my brakes on my car, right? They're new, right? This roof is new, but you've told the whole story and you can't get sued for non-disclosure. It works out, well that way, but you gotta do that because it's just, if you had a report from that prior leak and you hadn't disclosed it, it's a loser, right? You got to just write the check. So, you want to be safe that way.
All right. So I don't want to beat the non-disclosure too much, but so square footage I know is another big one, especially with remodels and new construction, but just even if it's not that, correct. Like you said, someone added on something with permits or without permits, it's not showing up. Somebody is counting finished garage or a finished attic. Like I remember recently, a couple years ago, I don't know if it was Cortazzo or Rabbit, there was a massive lawsuit in Malibu, 5-10 years ago, over square footage, and that they were counting maybe covered outdoor patios, and this is a big priced house, maybe a $30 million. I can't imagine the legal fees and the costs of getting into that kind of litigation.
Yeah, no. And again, and it's part of being in Southern California in the markets that you work in, Danny, right? You're talking about people with means, right? Yeah. And so it's not like somebody who doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer if they want to, right? Which is why you need to be even more careful, because you're dealing with clientele who are sophisticated, are not afraid of the legal system, are not afraid of hiring a lawyer, and have the means to do so.
Yeah. And so let me change this a little bit and just kind of ask: are there any sort of fun, crazy? It's probably not fun, but maybe they're funny now. Situations that things that stupid shit that real estate agents or clients have done that you're allowed to share that you can say, oh, here's some funny stuff. I can't believe someone actually thought this or did this.
Well, I've had a lot of those, right?
I'm sure.
I thought about this as you asked me to join you here. Just a couple of really crazy ones. Again, without mentioning names, we represented the seller of a really expensive house in the Bel Air area of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the husband and wife were being divorced. The husband was a very, very wealthy, very old man. The wife was a very, very beautiful, very young woman. And she lived in the house. She lived in the house. And the court ordered the house sold as part of the divorce. So a actor comes in to see the property and falls in love and buys it. And it goes into escrow.
Okay.
And the agent for the actor calls the next day and says, listen, my client would really love to bring his or her people by to see the house that they're buying.
Sure.
Do you mind if we come back tomorrow? They said no. The wife who lives in the house doesn't want to move, obviously, right? She's living in this gorgeous house for free while the husband pays for it.
Got it. So she doesn't want
And she knows that this particular actor believes in spirits.
Oh,
so she has a friend come by, and when the actor and the actor's family and entourage gets there, the friend and the wife are sitting at the kitchen table and they have a Ouija board on the table. And apparently, I know nothing about Ouija boards, but there are things that point to things, right?
Yeah.
And they're pointing to all the bad stuff.
Of course. Yeah.
And the actor's family walks through the kitchen, sees the Ouija board,
you gotta be kidding me.
Says, oh my God, what's this? And the friend says, I'm her psychic. The house has been possessed in the past. I cleansed it. But obviously, pointing to the Ouija board, says, they're back.
They're back.
They're back. And the kids run out, bring the actor person back in. They look at the board, eyes agape, mouth drops, run out, and 10 minutes later, they cancel the transaction.
Oh.
So this was, our agent was deposed in the divorce because the husband was trying to get the wife evicted from the house for interfering with the sale of the property.
That sounds like an episode on entertainment television.
Exactly. So that
happens.
That was one of my favorites. We had another one where another divorce, and divorces
bring out the worst.
Yeah, because people are not happy with each other, right? Where they entered into a contract to sell the property, and the wife then decided that she wanted to buy the husband out. She didn't want to sell, and the husband didn't want to sell to her, and the buyer insisted on going forward, and they were going to enforce the contract. So the wife reluctantly went forward with the transaction. In the house, there's a den, and it had built-in wooden shelving and cabinets and that kind of stuff with caps at the top. And so the day before escrow closed and she moved out, the woman went to the store. She bought about 15 raw chickens. Okay. And she went into the den. She took the top off the caps of the wooden cabinetry, and she dropped the raw chickens inside.
Oh. And
then put the caps back on.
Oh.
So about a week later, the house smells. It's disgusting. Yeah. Nobody could figure out what it was. And they had to bring in a contractor who finally was able to follow the smell, open up the cabinets and find these, these raw chickens that are just decomposing and just disgusting.
What's wrong with people?
What can I say? So that was another one.
This is what we deal with, Sam.
Let me give you one more because this one was quite entertaining. We sold a house to a single woman, and she moves in, and she sees and notes that her life kind of takes a negative turn once she moves into this house. She she starts getting sick a lot. She loses her job, and all kinds of really bad things keep happening to her. And so she believes in spirits and psychics too. This
Spirit
one of her
world.
things. So she goes to a psychic, and the psychic does a reading and says to her that I believe that the actual language was, I feel death around you.
Oh no.
Okay. And
You don't want to hear that.
the woman had not, yeah, exactly. The woman had not lost anybody in her life. She hadn't lost a family member. She hadn't lost, she didn't know what that meant. So she started, asking people, and she was talking to a neighbor one day about this and told the neighbor the story. And the neighbor said, well, of course, it's the house you're living in. And she said, what do you mean?
Yeah.
She said, well, yeah, you don't know why the house was sold to you? She says, no. She says, yeah. One day, the husband came home early from work and found the wife in bed having an affair and pulled out a gun and shot them both in the house. And nobody disclosed the death.
You don't need to disclose murder, do you?
No, murder in the main bedroom. Yeah. That's right. Why disclose that? But nobody disclosed it. Of course. Yeah, the first thing we all did, Danny, when we heard the story, was ask for the name of the psychic, right?
Yeah,
because a psychic knew what she was doing.
Keep us out of trouble. I mean, that is just bananas.
Yeah,
that is just bizarre.
It's funny because I worked, like I said, at big firms originally, right, in multi-million-dollar litigation, but I never saw anything like stuff surrounding this business because it's people's home. Yeah. Right. And so there's much more emotion involved, and they get more upset. And they care more about it, frankly, than the CEO of a big company does over the money. Money's money. It's business. Right. This is my house. The first deposition I ever took on my first in-house job was about literally a $15,000 leaky roof. And I asked the deponent, the owner of the house, the buyer, the woman, 5 questions. She started crying. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? But it's emotion because it's about her home. It's about her family.
For sure,
there's much more of that involved than
stakes are so high, emotions are so high. So all those things are elevated to the max in this type of transaction, which is why, as an agent, I have to be therapist sometimes. You switch hats. You got to keep people's personalities and emotions calm. And
no question about it. People do not look at it as a business transaction the way you would think they would. And so you have to be psychologist and advisor and all kinds of things. Yeah. Because again, it's about relationships as much as anything else. Again, agents, and I understand it. You only get paid when you close a deal, right? So you're scared if you lose a deal. But sometimes the best thing that can happen is to lose a deal because you're going to keep the client. You're going to do the next deal with them. You're not going to be involved in the mess after the fact. And not enough agents understand that.
Yeah, that's another thing you always preach early on in my career. Just that. The best deal you ever do sometimes is the one you didn't do. And you're right. They're the nightmares. And now I look back at the challenging ones are the ones that you're like, oh, I kind of had a sense I shouldn't do it. Something didn't feel right. And I should have listened to my gut. And it's not always our choice. Obviously, it's never our choice. It's the client. No. But you just know. Now it's like I get the hair on my back.
Right. Look, I wish more. Again, I say this all the time. There's so many times I get a call from an agent about a client, and I'm like, I listen to the story, and then I say, listen, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to first say the following. You shouldn't work with this person, right? Yeah. This is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be bad. I can tell. My radar's up. And they always tell me, almost always, oh, don't worry, I can handle them. Yeah, I'm good with people. I can handle people. And invariably, a month later, I get another
fast forward 30 days later. Oh, God.
Almost every time. Yeah.
Oh, God. So talk to me a little bit about, the big fundamental changes in real estate, residential real estate that we're seeing now. And if you think were there any other, I know there are every few years or every decade, significant changes, but let's start with the NAR, the decoupling of commission, and that on top of where we are in the market cycle, which makes it a little more compounded. It's a little more challenging with interest rates and market, yet coming off a historical 12-year run leading up to. Let's talk about that whole period, and that's a lot, and you can start and take it in any direction you want. But I guess start with jumping off at here we are with this new NAR settlement. What's your take on what this means and how it's going to change how I do my job?
Yeah. So, let me first say that by far in all the years I've been doing this is by far the most drastic and largest change we've seen in our
It
business.
is.
There,
Okay.
there, there have been a lot of changes. Technology's changed the business a lot and all that kind of stuff. But technology's done that everywhere, right? This is a structural change to the way real estate brokerage has been done forever that is gigantic. And I don't know that the impact will actually make things that different. Frankly, I'm not seeing that, to be honest with you. But just in the
Yeah,
way
me
you do
either.
things, the way it feels, it's a big change. Thankfully, we've done a lot of work to prepare for it,
Yeah.
and agents like you have been trained and are smart and are able to adapt to the changing market. But it's a big change, and the main big change, obviously, as the news has said, is how agents get paid specifically on the buyer side of the transaction. It used to be, for all the years I was in the business, that the listing agent would have a listing agreement. That
Yep.
agreement would have a commission amount, and then that commission amount would typically be split between the buyer broker and the seller's broker. And now, as you said, we've decoupled it so that the listing agreement now, for most places, just provides for the payment to the listing broker, the seller's agent. And then the buyer is negotiating their own fee directly and their own contract directly with the buyer's broker.
Yeah.
And so instead of one negotiation over fee, there are two: buyer's agent to buyer and seller's agent to seller. The mechanics of how it's working is actually, we're about a month into it now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
August 17th.
yeah, and as you know, Compass is nationwide. So I get to see in my role for Compass lots of different states and lots of different markets. And prior to August 17th, and in preparation of new documents to memorialize the new way things are going to be done, I saw a lot of differences from state to state to state.
Hmm.
But since then, the truth is, we've reached what I think is a relatively dominant practice that is pretty consistent across the country.
Interesting.
And that is the following: that I've got my two agreements, buyer agreement and seller agreement, with my two fees in there. And most of the time, what is happening is that when a buyer makes an offer for a house, they are asking the seller to cover the buyer's broker fee. It's
Yeah.
not being done. It can't be done through the MLS anymore. That's one of the structural changes
Right.
in the settlement. But it's not being done most places as often as I would have thought prior to the deal. It's not being advertised as much. It's not in every email blast. It's not in every postcard. It is mainly you're getting a put it in the offer kind of response from listing agents.
Yeah.
And then sellers are looking at it as one of the costs of the transaction, calculating it out, deciding what they like, and making a decision. Now, I am told, and my information is, that most sellers are willing to pay.
Yeah. It's been my
And the
experience.
reason they're willing to pay, Danny, is because it broadens their markets, right? A buyer who is allowed to leverage their money by borrowing that money, the money that's used to pay the commission, can borrow more than if they have to pay out of pocket to their own broker and have less money to make a down payment and therefore to borrow with, right? And so by paying it, the sellers have more people who can afford a higher price for their house. And I'm
Yeah.
seeing, not it's clearly not universal, and it will never be. But
Yeah.
most buyer or most sellers I'm told, are willing to do that because they want to broaden their market and drive their price up, right? And they're willing to do it the way it was. So in most cases, what we're seeing is write me an offer, ask me to pay for it if you want me to. I'll negotiate that in other terms, and we'll decide whether that's going to go forward. The
Right.
difference, if they say no, is now the buyer's got a choice at that point, right? Because the buyer has an agreement with the broker. And if the buyer wants to go forward with the house, the seller says, no, I'm not going to pay. The buyer can do that, but they're going to have to pay the broker. And so they
Yeah.
decide, do they want to go forward and pay the broker? Or do they want to find another house where the seller's willing to pay, right? But that is the gut change that we're seeing. And again, it seems to have settled into this kind of pattern more consistently than I expected and much more quickly than I expected.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I've seen in the streets and in the trenches is that commissions are being paid like they always are. The conversations are obviously more challenging because you're talking about new things and going against what the industry norms have been for decades, if not a century or more. But I've seen the sellers are paying, and they're just looking at it as another negotiation term. They may not be paying 3% or even 2.5% like they were to buyers. They may be negotiating, and I'm feeling that there's been more pressure on the buyer side commission than I experienced in the past. But again, it's only a month, and in
Right.
6 months it may be different, and in 6 years it may be very different. So,
Well, I want to point out, as you were talking, I was thinking back to what you said originally, which is it's very much market driven to a large extent, right? We're still in a low inventory market, right? Which means that
yes,
sellers have leverage.
more
And
leverage.
so depending on how many offers I have for my house, I can say, no, I'm not going to pay, right? Because this guy's willing to pay his own broker or that guy's not, and so I can play one against the other. If and when the market shifts and it becomes a higher inventory and a more of a buyer market, then you're going to have much more incentive to pay, right? But even now in a seller's market to a large extent, sellers are still paying, which I think is a good sign that will probably remain the prevailing practice. But again, it's always dependent on the property, the particular client, and the market for that property.
Yeah, it's case by case. And then I think at the end of the day, there'll be case studies and sellers will decide, hey, do I get the most net money when I pay a commission to someone else and they finance it or not? And by the way, I've also heard, and I don't know if you've seen or heard this from some lenders, that lenders are starting to offer buyers the ability to finance the commission. So, okay, buyer, you have an agent, you can, rather than paying them 2.5 or 3% in cash, you can add it onto your loan. And now your 20% loan, it's another 2.5, 3%. And I don't know if that's going to be, if that's legal, acceptable everywhere, but I've heard, and I haven't been in a transaction like that, but I've heard from lenders that that's stuff that they're doing and or at least discussing.
Look, it's clearly legal. I mean, I don't know any reason why it's not legal. I'm not a bank lawyer, so let me say that. But I don't know that there's any reason it's not legal. And I've heard it on a couple of instances, not broadly. But the question is, does the value of the collateral, meaning the property, justify adding that 2.5%?
The appraisal element,
right? Yeah. So if they can justify that it's a good risk for them to finance that additional money. In the few instances I've heard about banks lending, that's been what the conversation's about.
Yeah. Hey, look, it's going to shake out, and agents like me, we're going to pivot and do the best we can for our clients, regardless. And
that's right.
We'll see where it shakes out. I imagine in 6 months or a year from now, we'll have a lot more info. And like you said, with every market, the leverage could shift. You get into a buyer's market, and there's no offers on the table for a year or two, and you're a seller. You may think about paying a much larger commission to get your household and vice versa.
That's right. And remember,
that's just the way it is.
And remember, Danny, I'm sorry, across the country, there are some markets where they're not part of the settlements, right?
So I didn't realize that. I didn't think. I thought it was national.
Well, it is, but it's national with regard to NAR affiliated MLSs.
Not everyone.
And there are many that are not NAR affiliated; they're broker owned. And so there are some that still have, for example, a compensation offer in the MLS.
Yeah,
not a lot, but they're still out there. And so it's market driven in terms of buyer seller market, but it's also market driven in terms of those kinds of things.
Yeah, two things that have stood out to me over this NAR new settlement, new world. It's amazing to me how many clients, people in general, the general population, said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. We don't have to pay buyer commissions anymore." And I say, wait a minute. Commissions have always been negotiable. You never had to pay any commissions. You end up negotiating with your agent, and there are standards of practices in different markets and different price points. But generally, it's always been negotiable. That hasn't changed.
It's always negotiable, and no, you don't have to pay me, but of course I don't have to work for free.
I don't have to work. Yeah, I don't have to work, and you don't have to hire me. So that's one huge thing that stood out. And God, what was the next point? It was another point that was on the tip of my tongue, but I'm not thinking about it. Maybe when it pops back up, I'll throw it back at you.
What you're talking about, Danny, is just the lack of nuanced understanding in the media, right?
Yes.
The headlines are
headlines.
And they don't understand, or they're not right, or maybe the headlines are just not representative of what's in the article, but they don't come into the nuance. And there's a lot of nuance here. Our commissions have always been negotiable, will continue to be negotiable, but an agent has the right to say, I'm worth this, and this is what I work for. And if you don't want to pay it, that's fine. But I'm not going to represent you for free, for sure, and I'm not going to represent you for whatever the discount you want is. That's the negotiation between the parties.
And this brings up another point that sort of an offshoot tangent. So obviously people have choices, consumers have choices who they want to use as an agent. Is it going to be more challenging now for the non-established or the non-professional, non-full-time agents, the part-time? There's a lot of nuances and variations. You know what I mean by that. But for those type of people that maybe don't add much value, are those people going to have a bigger challenge representing buyers and getting buyers to agree to work with them now that you need to have a buyer agreement?
Look, maybe, right? There's got to be a mind shift here because a lot of buyers, right, figured a lot of buyers work with a lot of different agents,
Yeah,
right?
they don't care.
They don't care. And whoever finds me the house, I'll work with, right?
Yes.
And now you're being asked to commit, and that's
Yeah.
different. And
Right.
I think over time that will become less of an objection, right? But for now, it's different. And so, I mean, we have had instances where there are buyers who have refused. I've worked with this agent forever, but I'm not signing an agreement
Right.
where I'm paying you a commission. Okay, that's your right, but we're not going to work for free, right?
Yeah.
And we need an agreement because that's what the settlement says. So if you and I can't negotiate something we agree upon, we won't work together.
Yeah.
And that's just fine, and that's the way it's working. But again, I think over time, and by the way, not only over time, but not only because of the settlement, but there are states that are now passing laws that require the buyer representation agreements, right? So California, for example, as of January, is going to be required as a matter of law and not just as a matter of settlement. And so those things will make it easier on the broker and hopefully make the buyer understand that I'm not trying to take advantage of you. I'm just doing what I have to do to protect myself. You want me to protect you.
Right.
How good would I be at protecting you if I don't protect myself, right? and I will protect you, but it's going to bring you a value. You need to pay for that value. And the law requires it. So, but again, we're 1 month into a very large structural transition. Again, I don't think it's changed much in terms of getting paid and all that stuff, but there are mindsets that have to be readjusted a little bit. I'm sorry.
I like it. I've liked it so far, being able to say, hey, look, now I need an agreement.
Look,
most of my clients get it. They're like, yeah, no problem. We want to work with you.
Honestly, from my perspective as a guy who's represented real estate agents my whole life, right? I've been recommending this forever, right? I feel bad for a lot. I felt bad over the years. I can't tell you how many deals I've dealt with.
I know.
You've worked forever with a buyer, right? And you've spent hours. You put them in your car week after week after week. You've taken them to open houses. You've written offers that were not accepted. You've done it for it's been hours. And then they find something down the block with another guy and they write an offer and they ignore you. And frankly, they were entitled to do that. There was nothing you could do about that. Now you're going to protect yourself. Your time is valuable. Just like the client's time is valuable, so is yours. And you're entitled to protect yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. And again, they don't have to enter into those agreements with you. They can work with somebody else. They can represent themselves. They're entitled to do all that stuff. Everything's negotiable. But you are also entitled to say, here's what my value is, and this is how I work.
Yeah. It's going to be, I love it. I love this part of it. And I think it's going to play to my favor and others who are veterans and seasoned and bring a lot of value. And I think it's a good thing for professional brokers, that this part of it. All right, I'm turning the page.
You have good skills. I'm sorry, you have good skills, Danny. It's going to work well for you.
Oh, well, I attribute it all to you and Rabbit.
God forbid.
So I'm turning the page now to some more fun stuff. You've been working in the middle of LA, in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Brentwood, Malibu, some of the most expensive residential real estate on the planet. What are some of the biggest deals that you've seen cross your desk?
Well, look, I've seen a lot of deals in the 40 to 50 to $60 million range.
Yeah.
There was one listing. I don't think it ever actually sold, and so I don't know that it was a real listing. But there was a mountaintop in Beverly Hills that was at one point listed for $1 billion.
Was that the Aaron Kerman deal, the Microsoft guy? Maybe.
No comment, but it was $1 billion. It was $1 billion.
Allegedly.
Yes, but it sold for a lot of money. So we see here. I mean, I've seen a couple $100 million deals.
Yeah,
that's a rare thing, but 40 to 50 in this marketplace is not that rare. It happens pretty regularly, and
it's not that rare. That's true.
It's monopoly money to some people. It's crazy. I don't but yeah, there's a lot of very, very big value properties.
And what are the biggest commission checks associated with those deals? I mean, they're 7 figures.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I've seen many seven-figure commission checks. Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Many
no,
seven-figure commission checks. You can send them my way, please. Send them my way.
exactly. No, for sure. Yeah, no. I mean, look, we had a it was by these numbers, it was small. It was like 18 or 19, $20 million, something like that, that the buyer tried to or the seller tried to stiff us on. So that's quite a commission check. And
The seller
we
said, I
pursued
don't want to
it.
pay.
Yeah, we got paid. We got paid eventually.
But they did. They just said, we're just not going to pay.
Yeah, you got rich people with lawyers on staff. They think they can do whatever they want.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
kind of what it was.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting our money after a long fight that was unfortunately very expensive, but we ended up getting the age of the money, so that happens.
Yeah. So massive deals. There's massive deals. And what's amazing is that it's become, I don't want to say normal, but we're inoculated to it in our market to see the 30, 40, $50 million deal. It's, at least a couple dozen every year, if not more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And again, being a Compass now, it's interesting because, again, I deal with the whole country. And I mean, there are a lot of places. There are many places where those numbers are there, but very, very rare in most places, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we have, in New York, you see it maybe once in a while, and maybe in some really of the nice towns of Connecticut, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
On the water in Florida, maybe, right? But most places you don't have these numbers that we have in California. It's very different.
Nuts. All right. So any last words, anything you want to warn real estate agents? What should we look for? Any advice for us before we let you get back to?
I think I've given the advice, and I really, my advice, honestly, in this market would not be about disclosures, all that stuff. All that. I said it earlier, but I really think that you as a real estate agent need to value yourself, value your time, and be proud of what you do, and not let people push you around and discount you to a place where it's not worth your time. Right. Yeah. Agents think that, every deal matters, and they do, but and every client is a client when sometimes they're not really clients. Right.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to work with you, they're not really a client.
Right. Don't waste your time.
Value your time with people who want to work with you, who want to buy property or sell property, and who are willing to pay you. That's why the contract is such a good thing. If somebody's fighting with you so hard about a contract, don't work with them. Find somebody who will, because your time is valuable. Your job is really hard. I know more about the real estate transaction than most real estate agents, let alone people who don't do it, right? I would still hire a real estate agent to sell and buy my house because it's a really hard transaction. It's a complicated, time-consuming transaction. And so value yourself and value your time in ways that I don't think a lot of agents do. They're afraid. They work from fear, and so they hold on to everything instead of working from a place of power and knowledge of their value. And I think you need to remember how much you do and what you're worth, and stick with it when dealing with potential clients, not real clients.
Great advice. You heard it here first. The greatest legal mind in the business said he would hire an agent. So come on, people. What are we doing here?
Exactly.
What's going on, people?
I'm helping with your advertising, Danny.
Thank you. I'm going to use that from now on. Sam Kraemer says, hire an agent.
No, you can't quote me, man. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, look, Sam, thank you for sharing some time with us. I know you probably got a stack of issues to fires to put out.
Pleasure. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, I'll see you probably a little later or tomorrow. All right.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard and you love real estate as much as we do, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review and a comment. That would help our ratings so much. If you want to hear more episodes, you can go to The Deal with Danny Brown on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, or anywhere else you consume your podcasts.